The massive starship Crimson Claw limped through the asteroid field, its hull scarred and bleeding plasma into the void. Commander Zixithara clutched her command throne with talons that sparked against the metal, her scaled hide rippling with pain and frustration. The proud vessel of the Draconian Empire now moved like a wounded beast. Systems failing one by one. Status report, she growled, her voice carrying the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds. Hyperdrive is completely offline. Commander, reported her chief engineer, his reptilian features twisted with worry. Main engines at 12%. Life support holding, but barely. We're losing atmosphere through 17 hull breaches. Zixthara's golden eyes blazed with fury. The ambush by the rebel forces had been perfectly planned, striking at the exact moment when her ship was most vulnerable during a routine patrol. Now stranded in neutral space with a skeleton crew, she faced the humiliation of calling for rescue. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," announced the communications officer. "It's unusual." "Define unusual. It's from a human salvage vessel." "They're offering assistance." The bridge fell silent. Every Draconian present knew the stories about humans. The strange bipedal creatures from a small blue world who had somehow managed to carve out their own tiny corner of the galaxy. Most considered them nothing more than scavengers and traders, barely worthy of notice by the mighty Draconian Empire. A human vessel? Zixthara's voice dripped with disdain. What could those primitive creatures possibly offer us? The communications officer hesitated. They claimed to have an experienced mechanic aboard, someone who specializes in Draconian technology. Zixthara laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Impossible. Our technology is beyond their comprehension. Still, she paused, considering their desperate situation. "Patch them through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a cramped human bridge. A middle-aged human male with grease-stained coveralls and kind eyes stepped into view. His hair was streaked with gray, and his hands bore the calluses of someone who worked with machinery his entire life. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the salvage vessel Lucky Strike," the human said with a slight smile. "Looks like you folks are having some trouble." "Human," Zixthara began, her voice cold and imperial. "You will address me as Commander Zixthara of the Draconian Imperial Navy. We require no assistance from your kind." Jake's smile never wavered. "Well, Commander, with respect, your ship's been drifting for the past 6 hours, and I can see plasma venting from your starboard engines. My mechanic thinks he can help." "Your mechanic?" Zixthara scoffed. "No human has ever successfully repaired Draconian technology. Our systems are far too advanced for your limited understanding." "Maybe so," Jake replied calmly, "but my guy's a bit special. Name's Marcus Chen. Spent 15 years working in the neutral zones, picking up knowledge from every species he could find. He's got a real gift for understanding how things work, regardless of who built them." Zixthara was about to refuse when her chief engineer caught her attention. "Commander," he whispered urgently, "long-range sensors show 3 Imperial patrol ships heading this way. If they find us in this condition..." She understood immediately. Being rescued by the Imperial Navy would mean questions, investigations, and quite possibly a court-martial for allowing her ship to be ambushed so easily. Her career, built over decades of conquest and glory, would end in disgrace. "What exactly is your mechanic proposing?" she asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Jake turned to someone off-screen. "Marcus, you want to explain?" A younger human stepped into view, his dark hair tied back and his clothes covered in various types of grease and coolant stains. Unlike the captain, Marcus Chen had an intensity in his eyes that spoke of deep focus and understanding. "Commander," Marcus began, his voice respectful but confident, "I've been studying the plasma signatures from your engines. You've got a cascade failure in your primary power coupling, probably triggered by weapons fire. Your people are trying to reroute through secondary systems, but that's actually making the problem worse." Zixthara's chief engineer leaned forward, suddenly interested despite himself. "How could you possibly know our internal configurations?" Marcus smiled. "Because energy follows the same laws regardless of who builds the machine. Your ships use crystalline matrix cores, same basic principle as Altarian vessels, just with different harmonic frequencies. The problem isn't the damage itself, it's the feedback loop your automatic systems are creating while trying to compensate." The Draconian engineer's eyes widened. He's right. The compensation algorithms are creating harmonic interference. Zixthera felt a mix of surprise and irritation. How could this human mechanic identify a problem that her own trained engineers had missed? Even if you're correct, she said slowly, our ships require specific draconian tools and components. You couldn't possibly have what we need. Marcus grinned. That's where it gets interesting. I don't need draconian parts. I can jury-rig a solution using universal components that will not only fix your immediate problem, but actually improve your engine efficiency by about 8%. Impossible, Zixthera declared flatly. Tell you what, Jake interjected. Why don't we dock and let Marcus take a look? If he can't help, no harm done. If he can, well, maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement. Zixthera looked around her bridge at her injured crew and failing systems. Pride warred with practicality in her mind. Every minute they delayed increased the chance of being discovered by Imperial forces, and the shame of being rescued would be far worse than accepting help from humans. Very well, she said finally. You may dock. But understand this, humans. If this is some sort of trick or if you attempt to board my vessel with weapons, I will personally ensure that your deaths are both slow and creative. Jake's smile never faded. Wouldn't dream of it, Commander. Marcus just likes fixing things. It's what he does. As the human salvage ship moved to dock with the mighty draconian warship, Zixthera couldn't shake the feeling that she was making either the best decision of her career or the worst mistake of her life. Little did she know that this moment would change not just her fate, but the destiny of two entire species. The docking procedure between the two vessels was awkward at best. The Lucky Strike was barely a tenth the size of the Crimson Claw, like a small bird landing on the back of a sleeping giant. Marcus Chen stood in the airlock, adjusting his tool belt and running through mental calculations about draconian power systems. Remember, Captain Morrison said quietly, these aren't exactly known for their patience with outsiders. Keep your head down and just focus on the work. Marcus nodded, though his eyes held a spark of excitement rather than fear. Jake, I've been dreaming about getting inside a draconian warship since I was 12. This is like Christmas morning for me. The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor that seemed designed to intimidate. The walls were lined with dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and everything was built on a scale meant for beings much larger than humans. Commander Zixthera stood waiting, flanked by two guards whose weapons were casually pointed in Marcus's direction. Human, she said, looking down at him with barely concealed contempt, you will follow me directly to the engine compartment. You will touch nothing without permission. You will speak only when spoken to. Is this understood? Perfectly, Commander, Marcus replied, seemingly unbothered by her threatening tone. Though I should mention, once I'm working, I tend to talk through problems out loud. It helps me think. Zixthera's scaled brow furrowed. You will remain silent unless addressing me directly. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at the technology around him. The Draconians had built their vessels like fortresses, with redundant systems and fail-safes built into every component. But there was also an elegance to their engineering that spoke of a deep understanding of energy flow and structural dynamics. Your power distribution network, Marcus said suddenly, then caught himself. Sorry, Commander. I was just noticing how efficient your energy routing is. Very impressive. Zixthera stopped walking and turned to face him. What did you just say? The power distribution network. Most species just run energy from point A to point B in straight lines. But you've created this beautiful spiral pattern that actually amplifies the energy as it travels. It's brilliant engineering. The commander's chief engineer, a scarred Draconian named Thekmore, stepped forward. How could you possibly understand our power flow principles? These systems took our best minds centuries to develop. Marcus shrugged. Energy wants to move in specific patterns. It doesn't matter if you're human, Draconian, or some other species entirely. The physics are universal. You've just found a way to work with those natural patterns instead of fighting against them. They reached the engine compartment, and Marcus whistled softly. The space was enormous, filled with crystalline cores that pulsed with barely contained energy. But even Marcus could see the problems immediately. Warning lights flashed across multiple control panels, and the harmonious hum that should have filled the space was replaced by an angry, discordant whine. There, Thekmore pointed to a massive crystal formation at the center of the room. The primary power coupling. The humans damaged it during their attack, and now the entire system is cascading toward complete failure. Marcus approached the crystal slowly, pulling out a small scanning device that looked primitive compared to the draconian equipment around them. But as he worked, his expression grew more confident. "Okay, I see the problem," he said after several minutes. "The crystal itself isn't actually damaged, but when it took that hit, it shifted the harmonic frequency just enough to create interference with your backup systems." "Impossible," Techmore protested. "We've run full diagnostics on the crystal matrix. It shows no damage." "Because you're looking for physical damage," Marcus explained patiently. "But crystals like these store information in their molecular structure. When the frequency shifted, it created a feedback loop that's slowly corrupting the stored energy patterns." Thara watched with growing fascination as the human mechanic seemed to understand her ship's systems better than her own engineers. "And you believe you can repair this?" "Better than repair it," Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I can optimize it. See, your current configuration is running at about 72% efficiency, but if we adjust the harmonic resonance and add a few simple modifications, we can push that up to around 80%. "That's impossible," Techmore declared. "Our engineers spent decades optimizing these systems." Marcus was already opening his tool case, revealing an assortment of components that looked like they'd been scavenged from a dozen different species technologies. Sometimes fresh eyes see things that experts miss. "You've been thinking about this problem like draconians." "I'm thinking about it like an engineer." "What's the difference?" Thara asked, genuinely curious despite herself. "Draconians build things to last forever and work perfectly within specific parameters," Marcus explained as he began working. "Humans build things to adapt and survive in situations they were never designed for. Both approaches have their strengths." As Marcus worked, something extraordinary began to happen. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who understood the technology at a fundamental level. But he wasn't just following standard procedures. Instead, he was improvising, adapting human engineering principles to draconian technology in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "What are you doing?" Techmore demanded as Marcus began connecting what looked like a primitive human device to the sophisticated draconian crystal matrix. "Creating a harmonic dampener," Marcus replied without looking up. "Your crystals are incredibly powerful, but they're also incredibly sensitive. This little device will act like a shock absorber, smoothing out the energy fluctuations that are causing your cascade failure." "That device is crude human technology," Thara observed. "How could it possibly interface with our systems?" Marcus grinned. "Because at the quantum level, all energy manipulation follows the same rules. This dampener doesn't care whether it's working with draconian crystals or human fusion reactors. It just smooths out the bumps in the energy flow." As he made the final connections, the discordant whining in the engine room began to fade, replaced by a deep, harmonious hum that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull itself. Status lights that had been flashing red and yellow began turning green one by one. Techmore stared at his instruments in amazement. "Power efficiency is climbing. 75%, 78, 81%. This is impossible." "Not impossible," Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just different. Your people think like dragons. Powerful, proud, relying on overwhelming force. Humans think like humans. We make do with what we have and find creative solutions." Thara looked at the human mechanic with new eyes. "You have done in 1 hour what my engineers could not accomplish in days." "How?" Marcus packed up his tools thoughtfully. "Commander, your people are incredibly advanced. But sometimes advancement can become a limitation. You've become so focused on perfecting your existing technology that you've stopped looking for entirely new approaches." The implications of what had just happened were staggering. A human, a species the Draconians had dismissed as primitive scavengers, had not only repaired their most advanced technology but had actually improved it beyond what their own engineers thought possible. "What payment do you require for this service?" Thara asked formally. "Actually," Marcus said with a slight smile, "I was hoping we could talk about that. Because I have a feeling this is just the beginning." 3 days later, the Crimson Claw hung in space above the human colony world of New Geneva, its engines purring with an efficiency that amazed even its own crew. Marcus Chen had spent those 3 days aboard the Draconian vessel, not just completing repairs but teaching Techmore and his engineering team principles they had never considered. "The human has requested a meeting," Thekmore reported to Commander Zixthara. He wishes to discuss what he calls mutual technological exchange. Zixthara leaned back in her command throne, studying the data reports that showed her ship performing better than it had since its initial construction. Bring him to my ready room. And Thekmore, what is your professional assessment of this human's capabilities? The chief engineer's expression was troubled. Commander, in 3 days he has taught me more about energy systems than I learned in 20 years of Imperial training. His approach to engineering is completely different from ours, but it works. If anything, it works better than our methods in many cases. Explain. We build our technology to be perfect, unchanging, eternal. But Marcus builds technology to be adaptive, resilient, creative. When something breaks, we replace it with an identical component. When something breaks around Marcus, he finds a way to make it work even better than before. Zixthara pondered this as she made her way to the ready room. She found Marcus there, studying a holographic display of the ship's power systems with the intense focus of a scholar examining ancient texts. You wanted to speak with me, human? Marcus turned and gestured to the display. Commander, I've been thinking about what we've accomplished here. Your ship is running at optimal efficiency. Your crew has learned new techniques, and I've gained invaluable experience with draconian technology. But this is just scratching the surface of what's possible. What do you mean? Marcus manipulated the hologram, showing different sections of the ship. Your people have incredible technology, but you're using it in very traditional ways. Meanwhile, humans have developed techniques for adaptation and improvisation that could revolutionize how you approach engineering problems. Imagine what we could accomplish working together. Zixthara's eyes narrowed. You speak of alliance between our species. The Draconian Empire has never formed such partnerships with inferior races. With respect, Commander, what if we're not inferior? What if we're just different? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Your people excel at creating powerful, stable technology. My people excel at making that technology do things it was never designed to do. Those aren't competing strengths. They're complementary ones. Before Zixthara could respond, her communications officer's voice crackled through the intercom. Commander, we're receiving a priority transmission from Imperial Command. It's Admiral Carthex himself. Zixthara felt her blood chill. Admiral Carthex was the Emperor's right hand, commander of the Imperial Navy and quite possibly the most dangerous Draconian alive. Patch it through to my ready room. Human, you will remain silent. The holographic display shifted to show a massive Draconian whose scales were so dark they seemed to absorb light. His eyes burned with an inner fire that spoke of countless battles and zero tolerance for failure. Commander Zixthara, Admiral Carthex's voice rumbled like distant thunder. You will explain why your vessel has been detected in human space for the past 3 days. Admiral, my ship was severely damaged during the rebel ambush. We required emergency repairs and silence. The Admiral's gaze seemed to burn through the display. Intelligence reports indicate that you have allowed human technicians aboard an Imperial warship. You have given primitive aliens access to classified Draconian technology. This is treason of the highest order. Zixthara's career flashed before her eyes. Admiral, I can explain. The humans provided assistance when the humans provided nothing that our own engineers could not have accomplished given time. Your weakness and impatience have compromised Imperial security. Carthex leaned forward. You will immediately place the human under arrest and transfer him to Imperial custody for interrogation and execution. Then you will return to the capital for court-martial. Marcus stepped forward before Zixthara could stop him. Admiral, with respect, I think you're making a mistake. The ready room fell completely silent. Carthex's expression shifted from anger to astonishment that a human had dared to address him directly. You are the human technician, Carthex said slowly. You will be silent or I will order your immediate execution. I understand your concerns, Marcus continued calmly. But before you make any final decisions, you should know that I've made some significant improvements to Commander Zixthara's ship, improvements that could benefit the entire Imperial fleet. Impossible. Human technology is centuries behind ours. Marcus smiled. That's what everyone keeps saying. But your own engineers have confirmed that this ship is now operating at 81% efficiency, higher than any Draconian vessel has ever achieved. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Carthex's eyes. Show me the data. Zixthara transmitted the engineering reports, watching as the Admiral's expression slowly changed from contempt to confusion to something approaching alarm. These numbers, Carthex said slowly, they indicate performance levels that should be impossible with our current technology. Not impossible, Marcus said. Just different. Admiral, your empire has built its power on having the most advanced technology in the galaxy. But what happens when that technology stops advancing? What happens when other species find new approaches that you never considered? Our technology is superior to anything. Your technology is incredibly advanced, Marcus interrupted gently. But it's also rigid. You've perfected a specific approach to engineering, but perfection can become a trap. When you stop looking for new solutions, you stop growing. Carthex was quiet for a long moment, studying the performance data. What exactly are you proposing, human? Exchange. Your people teach us about advanced materials, energy manipulation, and structural engineering. We teach you about adaptive design, creative problem solving, and improvisation. Both species become stronger. The Emperor would never approve such an arrangement. Marcus leaned forward. What if I could prove that human engineering principles could improve Imperial technology across the board? What if I could show that cooperation between our species could give the Empire advantages that no other galactic power could match? Carthex's laugh was like grinding stone. You would stake your life on such a claim? I would, Marcus said without hesitation. Give me access to your most challenging engineering problems, the ones your best minds can't solve. Let me show you what human creativity can accomplish when combined with draconian technology. Zix Thara watched this exchange with growing amazement. The human was essentially challenging the entire draconian empire to prove that cooperation was stronger than dominance. Very well, Carthex said finally. You will accompany Commander Zix Thara to the capital. You will be given one opportunity to demonstrate these supposed improvements. If you succeed, we will discuss terms. If you fail, he smiled, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth, your death will serve as an example to any other species that dares to presume equality with dragons. As the transmission ended, Zix Thara turned to Marcus. Human, do you understand what you have just done? You have challenged the most powerful military force in the galaxy. If you cannot deliver on your promises, they will not simply kill you quickly. Marcus was already pulling up technical schematics on his portable device. Commander, I've spent my entire life believing that any problem can be solved if you're creative enough. I guess now I get to find out if I'm right. Zix Thara looked at this strange human who had somehow convinced an Imperial admiral to give him an audience with the Emperor himself. Either Marcus Chen was the most brilliant engineer in the galaxy, or he was about to become a cautionary tale told in every human settlement. She suspected it might be both. The draconian capital world of Piraxis was a monument to Imperial power. Massive spires of crystalline metal reached toward the sky like claws, and the very air seemed to thrum with barely contained energy. As the crimson claw descended through the atmosphere, Marcus pressed his face to the viewport, studying the architectural marvels that surrounded them. Impressive, isn't it? Zix Thara said, noting his fascination. Piraxis has stood unconquered for over 10,000 years. Every building, every structure is both a work of art and a fortress. It's incredible, Marcus agreed. But I'm not looking at it as a tourist. I'm looking at it as an engineer. Do you see how much energy this city is consuming just to maintain basic operations? Zix Thara frowned. Our power systems are the most efficient in the galaxy. Efficient at generating power, yes, but not necessarily efficient at using it. Marcus pointed to the massive energy conduits that snaked between buildings. You're losing probably 15% of your total output just to transmission losses. On a scale this large, that's enough wasted energy to power an entire human colony. Such losses are inevitable with systems this complex. Marcus smiled. That's what I used to think too. They were escorted from the landing platform by a full honor guard, though Marcus suspected the guards were there more to prevent his escape than to show respect. The Imperial Palace rose before them like a mountain of dark crystal, its surfaces reflecting and amplifying the light of Piraxis's twin suns. Inside, the corridors were vast enough to accommodate dragons in full flight, and every surface was decorated with scenes of Imperial conquest. Marcus noticed that in every image, Draconians stood triumphant over defeated alien species, including what looked suspiciously like humans. Subtle, he murmured to himself. They were brought to a waiting chamber where Marcus was surprised to find he wasn't alone. A dozen other beings sat in various states of nervousness, representatives from species across the galaxy, all apparently summoned for the same purpose. "You must be the human," said a tall, insectoid creature with multiple arms and compound eyes. "I am Engineer Prime Zilkath of the Xantharian Collective. I have heard rumors that you claim to improve upon draconian technology." "Word travels fast," Marcus replied. "What about you? What brings you here?" "The same challenge, I suspect. The Empire has summoned the finest engineers from every known species. We are to compete for the privilege of contributing to Imperial advancement." A scaled reptilian being that looked like a smaller, sleeker version of the Draconian spoke up. "I am Chief Designer Morgoth of the Saurian Republic. Our species has been developing technology for millennia longer than yours, human. This competition will be brief." Marcus looked around the room at the assembled beings, each representing civilizations with thousands of years of technological development. "What exactly is the challenge?" Zilkath's mandibles clicked nervously. "We are to solve the fortress problem, which is, for the past 50 years, the Empire has been trying to construct an orbital defense platform around their border worlds. Something powerful enough to stop entire fleets, but efficient enough to maintain continuously. Every attempt has failed. The power requirements are simply too enormous." Morgoth nodded grimly. "The energy needed to maintain defensive shields and weapons powerful enough to stop a fleet would require a power source larger than most moons. The Empire has tasked their greatest minds with this problem, and all have failed." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "And now they're asking foreign engineers to solve it?" "Not asking," Zilkath corrected. "Commanding. Success brings rewards and alliance with the Empire. Failure brings unpleasant consequences." Before Marcus could respond, the massive doors to the chamber swung open. Admiral Carthax entered, flanked by Imperial guards whose weapons hummed with deadly energy. "Engineers," the Admiral announced, "you will accompany me to the testing facility. There you will be given access to complete technical specifications for the Fortress project. You will have 72 hours to present a viable solution. Those who fail will be returned to their homeworlds with the Empire's disappointment." The way he said disappointment suggested that some of them might not survive the return journey. The testing facility was a marvel of draconian engineering, a complex of laboratories, fabrication units, and testing chambers that could simulate everything from stellar radiation to gravitational anomalies. Each engineer was given access to the complete project files and assigned a team of draconian technicians. Marcus spent the first 6 hours just reading through the documentation, and the more he read, the more impressed he became with the scope of the challenge. The Empire wanted a defensive platform that could generate shields powerful enough to stop Dreadnought-class weapons, maintain those shields continuously for years, and do it all while remaining mobile enough to respond to threats across an entire star system. "The power requirements alone are staggering," explained Thekmor, who had been assigned as Marcus's liaison. "Even our most advanced reactors cannot generate sufficient energy for more than a few hours of operation." "What about fuel costs?" "Astronomical. The exotic materials required for the reactors are among the rarest in the galaxy. A platform like this would consume resources equivalent to the gross domestic product of an entire world." Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the holographic display showing the proposed fortress design. It was elegant, powerful, and completely impractical. "Thekmor, what if I told you the whole approach is wrong?" "What do you mean?" "You're trying to build a fortress that can do everything. But what if instead of one incredibly powerful platform, we built a network of smaller, more efficient platforms that work together?" Thekmor's scales rippled with confusion. "Smaller platforms would be vulnerable to concentrated attack. Not if they're designed properly." Marcus began manipulating the holographic display, breaking the single massive fortress into dozens of smaller components. Think about it like a spider web. Each individual strand is fragile, but the web as a whole is incredibly strong, and if you damage part of it, the rest adapts to compensate. But the power requirements drop dramatically when you distribute the load. Instead of one massive reactor trying to power everything, you have dozens of smaller reactors, each optimized for specific functions. And here's the really clever part. They can share power wirelessly. Marcus began sketching modifications to the existing designs, incorporating principles he'd learned from studying everything from human telecommunications to the energy-sharing behaviors of certain Earth insects. This is fascinating in theory, Techmore admitted. But how do you coordinate dozens of platforms working together? The computational requirements alone. That's where human engineering comes in. Marcus grinned. We've been building distributed networks for centuries. Every human settlement, no matter how small, is connected to vast communication networks that automatically route information around damage or interference. The same principles work for energy distribution and defensive coordination. As Marcus worked, he began to attract attention from other engineers. Zilketh approached first, studying the evolving design with interest. Fascinating approach, the Xantharian admitted. You're essentially creating a technological organism rather than a machine. Exactly, Marcus said excitedly. Living things are incredibly efficient because they've evolved to use only the energy they need, when they need it. What if we could make our technology think like a living system? By the end of the second day, Marcus had developed something unprecedented, a distributed defense network that used 1/10 the power of the original fortress design while providing superior coverage and resilience. But more importantly, he had done something the Draconians had never expected. He had started teaching the other engineers. Your modular approach could work for our matter transmission systems, Zilketh mused, working alongside Marcus on power distribution calculations. And the distributed processing could revolutionize our fleet coordination protocols, added Morgeth, who had initially dismissed Marcus as primitive. By the time Admiral Carthex arrived for the final presentations, something extraordinary had happened. Instead of competing against each other, the engineers had begun collaborating, sharing techniques and approaches that no single species had developed alone. Marcus stood before the Admiral, surrounded by a dozen of the galaxy's finest engineers, all of whom had contributed to what was no longer just a human solution. It was something entirely new. Admiral, Marcus began, I'd like to present not just a solution to your fortress problem, but a demonstration of what becomes possible when different species share their knowledge. Instead of hoarding it, Carthex's expression was unreadable as he studied the holographic display, showing the distributed defense network. For several long minutes he examined the technical specifications, ran simulations, and consulted with his own engineers. Finally, he looked up. This design is unprecedented, but can it actually be built? Marcus smiled. With respect, Admiral, we've already built a working prototype. Would you like to see it? The prototype test facility orbited Paraxis like a small moon, its modular construction gleaming in the light of the twin suns. Admiral Carthex stood in the observation deck of the Imperial command ship, watching as Marcus Chen made final adjustments to the distributed defense network that shouldn't have been possible. Explain to me again how you constructed this in 72 hours, Carthex demanded. Marcus, floating in a maintenance pod outside the primary coordination node, spoke through the communication system with barely contained excitement. We didn't build it from scratch, Admiral. We repurposed existing technology. Those decommissioned orbital platforms your engineers were going to scrap? Perfect foundation for the network nodes. The old mining drones? Ideal for the mobile coordination units. Sometimes the best solutions come from using what you already have in new ways. Zixthara, who had been monitoring the construction from the beginning, shook her head in amazement. In 3 days he has created something our finest engineers deemed impossible. And he did it using equipment we considered obsolete. The human has assistants, Carthex observed, noting the dozens of engineers from different species working together throughout the facility. This was supposed to be a competition. It was, Marcus replied as he guided his pod back to the command ship. But sometimes the best way to compete is to change the rules entirely. Instead of trying to prove who was smartest, we decided to prove what we could accomplish together. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. You deliberately undermined Imperial protocol. I solved your problem, Marcus said simply. Isn't that what matters? Before Carthex could respond, alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the command ship. A massive holographic display activated, showing the outer edge of the Paraxis system where 3 rebel dreadnoughts had just dropped out of hyperspace. Impossible, breathed the ship's captain. How did they penetrate our detection grid? Admiral, the communications officer reported urgently. The rebel ships are broadcasting a message. They claim to have new stealth technology provided by The Altarian Confederation. Carthex's expression darkened. The Altarians were one of the few species that had successfully resisted Imperial expansion, largely due to their advanced defensive technologies. An alliance between them and the rebel forces represented a significant threat. Their stealth systems are more advanced than our detection capabilities, the tactical officer reported. They could potentially reach Paraxis before our main fleet arrives. Time to intercept? 4 hours, Admiral. Our orbital defense platforms can hold them for perhaps 30 minutes. Marcus had been listening to the exchange with growing concern. Admiral, what about the prototype network? We could test it against real targets. Absolutely not, Carthex snapped. That device is untested and unreliable. I will not stake the security of the capital on an unproven human contraption. With respect, Zixthera interjected, what choice do we have? The prototype network has more firepower than our existing orbital platforms, and if it fails, we've lost nothing that we weren't going to lose anyway. Marcus was already moving toward the network's control center. Admiral, give me permission to activate the system. If it doesn't work, you can blame the human and execute me for sabotage. If it does work, well then maybe we can talk about that technological exchange program. For several tense seconds, Carthex weighed his options. Finally, he growled, You have one chance, human. Do not make me regret this decision more than I already do. The network came online with a harmony that seemed to resonate through space itself. Instead of the brutal, overwhelming power signature of traditional draconian weapons, the distributed system hummed with an almost musical efficiency. Dozens of smaller platforms moved into coordinated patterns, their individual shields overlapping, to create a defensive barrier that was both flexible and incredibly strong. Incoming vessels detected, announced Zilkath from her position at the Zentharian sensor array. 3 Dreadnought-class ships, approaching at maximum sublight speed. Pattern. Analysis suggests they're planning a coordinated assault on the primary orbital defense grid, added Morgoth from the tactical station. Marcus studied the approaching ships through the network's sensors, which provided a level of detail that amazed even the draconian officers. They're not just using stealth technology, he realized. They're using it wrong. Explain, Carthex demanded. Stealth works by hiding your energy signature, but these ships are still generating massive amounts of waste heat. Their stealth systems are designed to fool traditional sensors that look for specific energy patterns, but our distributed network doesn't work that way. Marcus began highlighting thermal anomalies on the display. See these heat signatures? The stealth field is actually concentrating their thermal emissions instead of dispersing them. To our sensors, they're not invisible, they're glowing like stars. Targeting solutions locked, reported the weapons coordination team, a mix of engineers from 4 different species working together seamlessly. Fire, Carthex ordered. What happened next redefined everyone's understanding of space combat. Instead of the massive brute force energy beams that characterized draconian weapons, the network fired precisely coordinated pulses that seemed to bend space itself. The beams didn't just hit their targets, they anticipated their movements, adjusting trajectory in real time as the enemy ships tried to evade. The first rebel dreadnought's shields collapsed under the coordinated assault within seconds. The second managed to return fire, but its massive energy beams were absorbed and redistributed by the network's overlapping defensive screens. The third attempted to flee, but found itself trapped in a cage of energy that prevented it from jumping to hyperspace. Total enemy fleet neutralized, Morgoth reported with something approaching awe in his voice. No damage to network components. Power consumption at 67% of maximum capacity. The observation deck fell silent. Carthex stared at the tactical display, which showed 3 disabled dreadnoughts drifting helplessly while the prototype network maintained perfect formation around them. How? The Admiral asked finally. Marcus was grinning like a child with a new toy. The network doesn't just coordinate its attacks, it learns from them. Every shot fired teaches it how to fire more effectively. Every defensive maneuver shows it how to defend better. It's not just a weapon system, Admiral. It's an adaptive intelligence. And the power consumption? Should have been over 90% for an engagement like that, admitted Thekmore. But the distributed system meant that only the platforms that needed to fire actually did so. The others maintained defensive positions and shared their power with the active units. Zixthara approached Marcus with an expression that mixed respect with concern. You have created something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Do you understand the implications of what you've done? Marcus sobered. I've proven that cooperation is more powerful than competition. That different approaches to problem solving can create solutions that no single species could achieve alone. And yes, Commander, I understand exactly what that means. Carthex activated his communication system. Imperial Command, this is Admiral Carthex. I need to speak with the Emperor immediately. Priority Alpha. As they waited for the connection, Marcus looked out at the network of platforms that had just changed everything. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if he had just helped create a more powerful draconian empire, or if he had started something that would ultimately make empires themselves obsolete. Admiral, came the deep, resonant voice of Emperor Drakthul himself. Report. Your Imperial Majesty, Carthex began carefully. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. The human engineer has succeeded beyond all expectations. The implications are significant. There was a long pause before the Emperor responded. Bring him to me immediately. As the command ship prepared to depart for the inner palace, Marcus realized that his biggest test was yet to come. He had impressed an admiral and revolutionized Imperial technology. Now he had to convince an emperor that the future belonged not to those who conquered, but to those who collaborated, and he had to do it without ending up as a cautionary tale told in the deepest dungeons of the Empire. The inner palace of Emperor Drakthul existed in a space between spaces, accessible only through a dimensional fold that required clearance from the Emperor himself. As Marcus's transport ship passed through the shimmering portal, he found himself in a realm that defied conventional physics, a vast chamber that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, with crystalline formations that pulsed with the heartbeat of the Empire itself. Stay close and speak only when spoken to, Admiral Carthex warned as they approached the throne platform. The Emperor has ruled for over 3,000 years. He has seen civilizations rise and fall, and his patience for alien perspectives is limited. Marcus nodded, though his engineer's mind was already cataloging the impossible architecture around them. The palace didn't just house the Emperor. It was a technological marvel that somehow existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing Drakthul to project his influence across the galaxy instantaneously. Emperor Drakthul was enormous, even by draconian standards. His scales were black as the void between stars, and his eyes held the weight of millennia. When he moved, space itself seemed to bend around him, and Marcus realized that the Emperor wasn't just sitting on a throne. He was physically integrated with the palace's dimensional machinery, so the Emperor's voice resonated through multiple dimensions simultaneously. You are the human who claims to improve upon the technology of dragons. Marcus forced himself to meet those ancient eyes. Your Imperial Majesty, I don't claim to improve upon your technology. I claim to have found ways to make it work differently. Differently. The Emperor seemed to taste the word. For 3 millennia, I have built this empire on the principle of absolute superiority. Draconian technology, draconian military might, draconian perfection. And now a primitive alien suggests that our approach is somehow insufficient? Not insufficient, Your Majesty, incomplete. The temperature in the throne room seemed to drop several degrees. Elaborate. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either change the galaxy or end his life. Your Majesty, you've built the most powerful empire in galactic history by being better than everyone else at everything. But what happens when better stops being enough? Impossible. Draconian technology advances constantly. Does it? Marcus gestured to the palace around them. This is incredible technology. Probably the most advanced single construct in the galaxy. But when was it built? Drakthul's eyes narrowed dangerously. 2,000 years ago. And in those 2,000 years, how many fundamental breakthroughs has draconian science achieved? How many completely new approaches to old problems? We have perfected existing technologies. Exactly, Marcus interrupted, then immediately realized he had just cut off an emperor who could erase him from existence with a thought. I mean, respectfully, Your Majesty, you've optimized everything to the point where further optimization becomes impossible. You've reached a plateau. Admiral Carthex looked like he was preparing to order Marcus's execution, but the Emperor held up a massive clawed hand. Continue your explanation, human. Carefully. Your Majesty, imagine if every species in the galaxy approached problems differently. Humans excel at adaptation and creative problem-solving. Xantharians are masters of precision engineering. Altarians understand defensive technologies better than anyone. Saurians have developed temporal mechanics that no one else has even attempted. What if, instead of trying to conquer or ignore these differences, you found ways to integrate them? You speak of weakness, of dependence on inferior species. Marcus shook his head. I speak of strength that comes from diversity. Your Majesty, the prototype network that just defeated 3 dreadnoughts wasn't built with purely draconian technology. It combined your power systems with human networking protocols, Xantharian precision targeting, and Saurian temporal prediction algorithms. The result was more effective than anything any of our species could have built alone. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that seemed to peer into his very soul. You propose that the Draconian Empire abandon the principles that have made it supreme. I propose that the Draconian Empire evolve, Marcus said firmly. Your Majesty, there are other powers in the galaxy that are starting to work together. The Altarian Confederation isn't just one species anymore. They've become a true alliance of equals. The Rebel Coalition is growing stronger because they share technology and tactics freely. If the Empire doesn't adapt, it will eventually find itself outnumbered by enemies who have learned to cooperate while you remained isolated in your superiority. Drakthul shifted on his throne, and Marcus felt the dimensional fields around them fluctuate. And what do you propose I do about this situation? Lead the greatest technological revolution in galactic history, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. Instead of ruling through conquest, rule through innovation. Instead of demanding submission, offer partnership. Become the center of a galaxy-wide network of cooperation that makes everyone stronger. With the Draconian Empire as its heart, you ask me to give up power. I ask you to transform it into something greater. Your Majesty, power built on fear and dominance is always temporary. Eventually, someone stronger comes along. But power built on mutual benefit and shared advancement, that can last forever. The Emperor stood slowly, his massive form rising until he seemed to fill the entire throne room. For a terrifying moment, Marcus thought he had pushed too far, that he was about to become a very small footnote in Imperial history. Instead, Drakthul began to laugh, a sound like controlled thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality. 3,000 years, the Emperor said, and no one has dared to suggest that I was thinking too small. Tell me, human, if I were to consider this proposal, what would you require? Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized the Emperor was actually listening. A formal alliance between the Empire and the human colonies to start. Joint research facilities where engineers from different species can work together. Open technological exchange programs, and most importantly, a commitment that the Empire will seek cooperation before conquest. And in return, humanity offers everything we've learned about adaptive technology, distributed systems, and creative problem-solving. We help you build not just a stronger empire, but a better one that grows through innovation instead of intimidation. Drakthul moved to one of the palace's viewing screens, which showed a real-time map of the galaxy with Imperial territory marked in red. Admiral Carthex, what is your assessment of this proposal? Carthex looked distinctly uncomfortable. Your Majesty, the humans' ideas are radical, but I cannot deny their effectiveness. The prototype network he designed is superior to anything our own engineers have produced, and the collaboration between species during its construction was remarkably efficient. Commander Zixthara? Zixthara stepped forward. Your Majesty, I have observed this human's methods firsthand. He does not seek to replace our technology. He seeks to help it evolve. In 3 days, he taught my engineers techniques that have improved our ship's performance beyond anything I thought possible. The Emperor studied the galactic map for several long minutes. Human, you realize that what you propose would fundamentally change the nature of the Draconian Empire. Yes, Your Majesty. It would require abandoning strategies that have served us for millennia. Yes, Your Majesty. It would mean sharing power and knowledge with species we have always considered beneath us. Yes, Your Majesty. Drakthul turned back to face Marcus, his ancient eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to ignite the very air around him. Then we shall proceed. Admiral, you will establish a joint task force to develop protocols for technological exchange with allied species. Commander, your ship will serve as the prototype for Imperial human cooperation, and you, human, will have the resources of the Empire at your disposal to prove that cooperation is indeed superior to conquest. Marcus felt a mixture of elation and terror as the full implications of what he had accomplished settled over him. Your Majesty, what if I'm wrong? What if this cooperation leads to weakness instead of strength? Emperor Dractyl smiled, an expression that was both terrifying and magnificent. Then, human, you will have given me the most interesting failure in 3,000 years of rule. But somehow I suspect that failure is not in your nature. As Marcus left the inner palace, he realized that he had just committed not only himself, but his entire species, to proving that the future belonged to those who built bridges instead of walls. The biggest test of human ingenuity was just beginning, and the stakes were nothing less than the future of the galaxy itself. 5 years later, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the Unity Station, a massive space facility that existed in the neutral zone between Imperial and human space. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from dozens of different species docking and departing, a sight that would have been impossible just a few years ago. "Status report," he said to the mixed crew of humans, Draconians, Syntherians, and other species who staffed the station's coordination center. "The new hybrid drive systems are performing beyond expectations," reported Chief Engineer Thekmore, whose scales now bore intricate tattoos that marked him as a certified multi-species technology specialist. The Altarian-Human-Draconian joint venture has reduced hyperspace travel time by 40% across all vessel classes. "Medical research is showing similar breakthroughs," added Dr. Sarah Kim, a human physician who worked alongside Draconian healers and Syntherian bioengineers. "The combination of human adaptive medicine, Draconian regenerative techniques, and Syntherian precision surgery has virtually eliminated what we used to consider terminal illnesses." Marcus nodded, still amazed by how quickly things had changed once the barriers between species had been lowered. "Any word from the Emperor?" "His Majesty is currently hosting the Third Galactic Cooperation Summit on Pyraxis," Zixthera reported. She had been promoted to Admiral and now commanded the Imperial Cooperation Fleet. Representatives from over 200 species are attending. "The agenda includes proposals for joint exploration of the Andromeda Galaxy." Marcus smiled. "Andromeda? 5 years ago, we were worried about traveling between star systems. Now we're planning intergalactic expeditions." "The exponential advancement curve is remarkable," observed Zilkath, who had become the station's chief technology coordinator. "When species share knowledge freely instead of hoarding it, innovation accelerates beyond all previous models." Through the communication system, Admiral Carthex's voice crackled with an emotion that would have been impossible in the old Empire. Genuine enthusiasm. "Marcus, you need to see the latest reports from the frontier worlds. The joint human-Draconian colony ships are establishing settlements at a rate that's breaking all records. More importantly, they're sustainable settlements that actually improve the planets they're built on." Marcus made his way to the main briefing room, where a holographic display showed the current state of the galaxy. What he saw still took his breath away. Instead of the rigid territorial boundaries that had defined galactic politics for millennia, the map now showed a complex web of interconnected alliances, trade routes, and joint research facilities. "The numbers are staggering," reported the station's AI, a collaborative project that combined human programming techniques with Draconian quantum processing and Altarian predictive algorithms. "Galactic poverty has decreased by 67%. Interspecies conflicts are down 89%. Technological advancement is proceeding at rates that exceed our most optimistic projections." "What about the holdouts?" Marcus asked. There were still some species and governments that refused to participate in the new cooperative framework, viewing it as either a threat to their independence or a sign of weakness. "The hegemony of Vash continues to resist all diplomatic overtures," Carthex admitted. "They've closed their borders and declared the cooperation movement to be a conspiracy to dilute species purity. Intelligence suggests they're developing new weapons technologies in isolation." Marcus frowned. "How serious is the threat?" "Unknown. Their technological base was already formidable, and 5 years of isolated development could have produced significant advances. However, their refusal to cooperate means they're also missing out on all the collaborative breakthroughs. It's impossible to predict whether they've fallen behind or developed something genuinely dangerous." And the rebel coalition? Zixtharo's expression grew more complex. That's interesting. Many of the rebel groups have actually joined the cooperation framework. It turns out that when people can achieve change through innovation and collaboration, they're less inclined toward violent revolution. The remaining rebel factions are mostly composed of species that were never really fighting the Empire. They were fighting the idea of any large-scale organization. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. So we've solved some problems and created new ones. What about Emperor Drakthul? How is he handling the transition? Better than anyone expected, Karthek said with something approaching wonder in his voice. The Emperor has embraced the role of galactic coordinator rather than galactic ruler. He spends most of his time mediating disputes between species and facilitating new collaborative projects. Yesterday, he personally approved a joint Saurian-human temporal research facility. Temporal research? The Saurians have theoretical models for limited time travel. Humans have developed the engineering techniques needed to build the necessary equipment. Together, they might actually achieve controlled temporal manipulation within the next decade. Marcus shook his head in amazement. Time travel. 5 years ago, I was just trying to fix a broken engine. And that broken engine led to the greatest transformation in galactic history, Zixthara observed. Marcus, do you ever regret what you started? Marcus looked out at the bustling station around them, where beings from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to achieve. Children of mixed heritage played in the station's parks, speaking languages that combined elements from multiple worlds. Scientists shared discoveries freely, knowing that knowledge belonged to all species rather than just their own. No, he said finally, but I do worry about what comes next. We've proven that cooperation works, but we've also created something unprecedented in galactic history. We're essentially building a single unified civilization that spans hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. That's never been attempted before. Are you concerned about failure? Thickmore asked. I'm concerned about success, Marcus replied. What happens when we run out of problems to solve through cooperation? What happens when this unified civilization becomes so powerful that it starts to see itself as superior to the species that remain outside it? What happens when we accidentally become the thing we were trying to replace? The question hung in the air like a challenge. After a moment, Zilkath spoke up. Perhaps that is why humans were necessary for this transformation. Other species might have seen the end goal as achieving perfect cooperation. But humans always ask, what happens next? Marcus smiled. And that's probably the most human trait of all. Never being satisfied with the status quo. Always pushing for the next breakthrough, the next improvement, the next challenge. Speaking of challenges, Karthex announced, the Emperor has requested your presence at the Cooperation Summit. Apparently there's a new proposal on the table that requires your specific expertise. What kind of proposal? First contact protocols for communication with species from other galaxies. It seems our success here has attracted attention from civilizations beyond the Milky Way. Some of those civilizations have technologies that make our most advanced systems look primitive. The question is whether we're ready to extend our cooperation model to an intergalactic scale. Marcus felt the familiar thrill of a new challenge, mixed with the weight of responsibility that had become his constant companion. Other galaxies, other civilizations, new technologies and new approaches to problems we haven't even thought of yet. Are you interested? Zixthara asked with a knowing smile. Marcus looked around at the diverse crew that had become his extended family, at the station that represented everything they had built together, and at the galactic map that showed a civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. Zixthara, he said, already beginning to plan. When has a mechanic ever turned down the chance to see how someone else's engine works? As the Unity station continued its slow orbit through space, serving as both a symbol and a practical demonstration of what was possible when species chose to build together, rather than fight each other, Marcus Chen prepared for the next phase of humanity's greatest adventure. The galaxy had been transformed, but the universe was vast, and there were always new problems to solve, new friends to make, and new ways to prove that cooperation truly was stronger than conquest. The crippled dragon had learned to fly again. The human mechanic had become a galactic diplomat, and the Emperor's biggest mistake had turned out to be the greatest decision in the history of the Draconian Empire. But more importantly, they had proven that the future belonged not to those who conquered, but to those who chose to build something better together. And in a universe full of wonders yet to be discovered, that was just the beginning.